Well, I reckon you've heard about Jack, the boy that climbed the beanstalk and outsharped the giant and all. You've probably heard about Cinderella too, and the 3 bears, 3 little pigs, 3 billy goats gruff. But did you ever hear of a girl named Molly Whuppie? Molly Whuppie lived way up at the head of the Hoot Owl Holler, right up there, with her mommy and her daddy and her sisters, Paul and Bets. And they was real well satisfied up there. They liked how the sun come up big and yellow and sudden of a morning over that east hill. And they loved how it went down of an evening over the west ridge in a big show of purple and orange and pink. They liked how the wind sounded in the trees on top of the mountain and how the creek sounded running over the rocks. And they liked having their friends and their kinfolks close around them. But now they had their troubles too, like anybody else. They were not rich people, the Whuppies were not. In fact, they didn't have much of anything at all, but just one another and some very pretty scenery. But it's not that they was afraid to work. They worked daylight to dark every day it didn't rain. Hewing and hauling and hoeing and planting and picking and plucking and pickling and putting up and grubbing new grounds and digging coal and cutting timber and drawing water. But their little old farm was as steep as a mule's face, and no matter how hard they worked, they could not make a go. So they hadn't decided, bad as they hated to, they would have to move off and leave the Hoot Owl Holler and see whether they could do better somewhere else. So they put what little plunder they had in the wagon, hitched up the mule, went and put their hats on, put out the farm, whistle for the dog, and lit out. Well, they went all that day, all that evening, and they come to a place they never had been to before. It was a completely different county. And they was not even kin to anybody there that they knew. And did not know a soul. Well, so it was getting dark, and they was getting tired, and they said, well, what are we going to do? Why don't we just pull the wagon over here beside the road, try to get a good night's sleep, and get a good start right soon in the morning. So they decided they'd pull over. They started getting ready to go to bed, in the wagon. And then they started getting a little nervous. Well, we don't know this country in here. There might be bears in here. There might be copperheads. There might be robbers. There might be giants. We don't know. Somebody might better sit up all night and keep a good lookout what goes on. So then the next question was, who's going to do that? Well, I ain't going to do it, volunteered Poppy Whuppie. And then the mother chimed in, my nerves is shot. And she swore she could not sit up all night if they paid her $1 million. Well, that was very unlikely they was going to pay her $1 million. But she said she couldn't sit up. And then, so they all looked at Polly. And Polly said, I can't sit up. If I was to stay up all night, I would drag around and feel bad all the next day. And then they looked over at Betsy. And Betsy said, don't look at me, I'd be scared to death. So Molly Whuppie said, shoot far, I'll sit up. Molly Whuppie was one of them people that did not know the meaning of afraid. she would go by the cemetery late at night, right by herself, not think a thing about it. Stay all night by herself, go right to sleep, and sleep the best ever was. So they all agreed then that Molly would be the one to sit up. So Molly got her a few little flat rocks. She liked to do that before she did anything. And climbed up in the top of a big, tall pine tree where she could see the country all around. And if anything was to come up on them, she'd see it. Well, she sat up there all night, but nothing come and bothered her. She just heard some dogs barking way over there somewhere, and maybe a screech owl or two. And that was it. So along about just before daylight, she got so sleepy she couldn't hardly hold her eyes open. But just then, she heard a big racket right over there. And she looked over there to see what it was, and what do you think it was? That's right, it was giants. Two big fellers over there, and they were building them a cook farm to eat hogs. They had been out all night stealing hogs from everybody they could get up with to steal a hog from, and they had stole every hog they could find, and then they was building a big farm, cook the hogs, and gonna eat them. Well, now these fellers was big, even for giants, and mean, even for giants. And they had, naturally, they couldn't use regular tableware. So they had to use pitchforks for their forks. And they used big shovels for their spoons, and that about fit them. Well, so there was two brothers, and Molly was watching them, from up in that tree. And here in a minute, one of them got him a piece of hog meat cooked real good, and he had it on that pitchfork, about to put it in his big mouth there. Mouth is a watering, And just as he got that right up to his mouth, Molly Whuppie let loose with one of them little rocks. She was a good shot. She hit and took and clipped that meat clean off of that giant's pitchfork. Well, it went in right into his chin like that, and he hollered he was killed. I'm killed! Well, and like most people, when something goes wrong, his first inclination was to look around and see who he could blame it on. So he looked over there, and there was his brother sitting there, so he blamed it on him. He said, "What do you mean causing me to lose my meat and job myself in the chin with a fork? I'm going to come over there and smack the far out of you." Well, his brother was offended by that on the grounds that he was innocent as a newborn babe and had not been doing a thing in this world but just sitting there minding his own business, trying to eat a bite of meat. So they spluttered around a while of fussing, and then finally, that second one, he decided he'd get him a big bite of meat. So he got him a big bite of hog meat, put it on that pitchfork, put it up to his mouth. Molly Whuppie let loose with a rock again. Clipped that meat clean off his fork. It landed over there, and he jobbed himself in the chin with pitchforks and hollered he was killed. I'm killed! So then, that made him so mad. He figured his brother had done it, and so he got one of them shovels and hit his brother over the head with the flat of a shovel and raised a big knot on his head. Well, that made him madder far. And so they commenced to fight, and they fought, and they fed, and they fought, and they fed, and they fought, and they fed till they was knocking down big trees and bushes all over the place. Giant hair and giant teeth a-flying.